Convening a community directory of hosts as well, so that you can reach out to other hosts and talk about, like, hey, does anybody have, you know, a good poster that I could hang in a cafe, or has anybody ever struggled with this aspect of startup? So we can help, but we do recommend as well that you build a team around yourselves. It is surprising how many people came forward with helping hands for us, and I'd say reach out to maybe some other, especially people who show up to your first couple of classes. They become people who might re-engage as facilitators, or people who might help you find some supplies to track down funding, or do any of those little pieces. So that's another piece of a little recommendation. How about the next one there, Heather? Okay, so once we've kind of given you as much support as we can, I think the next stage is kind of just the logistics. We have some class templates that we can share for posting, so that you don't have to try and figure out how to word pieces, like how do I share about this particular event. There are a number of classes that we've offered. Actually, we're well over 300. I think we're pushing 350 events now. So there's a whole list of different topics that if you can dream of it, we may have already offered it. So you can copy those class templates to advertise the events. We have some sample posters and things like that for you to hang around. And really, put the kettle on, start the tea. The people will come based on our experience. And if that's a little more challenging for you at startup, we're here to have conversations and some ideas to be shared from our other hosts. What else is on there that I might want to share? We do have the hosting guidelines that we created, and you'll see that reflected in the document that many of you may have seen if you went to the Start a Folk School piece on our website. But a lot of what we talk about in terms of hosting guidelines are in there and should probably be reviewed. But we do place a lot of emphasis on making sure that you can accommodate all kinds of different needs. Some of the things that we've noted are just access to your home whenever possible, making that like we have a ramp that goes over our steps, and that just makes it accessible in a different way. Lighting, strong lighting, especially when you're doing workshops where there's small things like sewing or something like that. It's really important to us that alcohol not play a part in any of our programming, because you never know if that's going to be a barrier for someone to participate. So a lot of our food classes were very specific about, I acknowledge that this feels like a community meal, but let's not bring wine or beer or anything of that nature. And we do try to reuse as many materials and make the classes as sustainable as possible. Mason jars are collecting dust in everyone's basement. They are. So putting out the word for mason jars to be donated or other materials to be donated for different types of classes is also really helpful. The process for introductions is pretty defined as well, and is something else that we share. There's like a template that people can read off. If you haven't been to any of our sessions here in Nova Scotia and you're trying to do this on the other side of the world, it is just important to note that you explain what it is that we're doing, and so you can read the template to understand more about that. But it really is making sure that people know that this is about community building, and to make sure that all voices have equal opportunity to speak into the circle. And as a host, you're just making sure that you're holding that space in a way that makes it accessible to everyone to participate. And really spending a lot of time on those introductions is actually the differentiating factor at Life Schoolhouse, because we are here to connect and to really know people and in our community at a deeper level. So yeah, there's a great opportunity to ask good questions at that point. What else have we got there? Flip ahead for me. One more. So another thing that we noted when we first got started, I did facilitate the first one and then never facilitated again, because we had to find the hosting versus facilitator role. And hosting is a job in and of itself. But that said, some people are really strong facilitators, might not want to host in their own home, but really strong facilitators, and others have tremendous skills to share, but may never have actually tried to explain it to another person. And so it does take some time to, if you've found someone, you went to a farmer's market, you saw something that was really interesting and thought that others would like to hear about, you've approached this person, they've said, yeah, I'd be interested in sharing. One of the resources that we've pulled together is how to prepare that person, just to make sure that they know what would be helpful for a community of people who are coming to learn some tips and tricks. And it's always just useful to have a conversation with them to make sure that they know what they're coming into, that there will be a lot of questions, there'll be a lot of engagement. It's not a lecture, it really is a skills share, so that that doesn't come as a surprise, I'd say. One of the other questions in the webinar was, how the heck do you find facilitators? And I will say that once we got started, they came out of the woodwork. They really did. Anyone that attended a class would say, you know, I've never really thought of myself as a teacher, but I do know how to knit socks, or I do know how to program Arduino, or Arduino, I always say that wrong. But the skills that are out there are extremely diverse and wide-ranging. And when you provide a platform for people who don't have to be a professional in their industry to be able to share something, you'd be surprised at how many people are interested in sharing. We found a lot of, early on, and we found a lot of facilitators by visiting farmers markets and talking with the people that are producing. These are kind of the basement or garage innovators who've come up with something or crafted something, or that's usually our strong base of facilitators, comes from just engaging in our community and saying, wow, look at that thing you did, that's amazing. Would you be willing to explain that or help out 5 or 6 other people who would really be curious about that? And so that's pretty simple methodology. I feel like I'm not sharing anything radically helpful, but we really just asked, and then they came in droves. So how about the next piece? So we may have, did we skip step 7? No, we genuinely, that's me on the slide. I must have missed one when I converted it to slides, so apologies. We found that within the first couple events, we had more people coming than we would be able to manage in our space. So don't love the idea of ticketing necessarily, because we don't like that idea of people feeling they have to have a ticket, but we had to have a way to manage the volume. And we had 80 people sign up to come to a soap making class in my living room. And that's when I realized, we're going to have to try and make sure that there are only 8, so we have enough supplies. So we have a means to do so, and we've been setting it up so that other locations anywhere else can actually just come in under and use the learnings that we've had with how to use Eventbrite and how to use social media. So we actually have kind of a package to help people at startup. I'm actually seeing a question coming in here about demographics coming to our events, so I can kind of pause there to answer that question. That's been interesting because I haven't been able to recognize a super obvious pattern. I would say that the consistency in any demographics seem to be based around like the theme of an event. But even then, there isn't a tremendous amount of consistency, because you'll see, let's say you're offering like a weaving class. We see a lot of 20-year-olds that show up for that, and we'll see a lot of 60, 70-year-olds that will come to that as well. Depending on where we're offering in our city, we'll see so kind of what community you offer in. It tends, whoever the host is, tends to attract people that look and think like them in their particular neighborhood for the most part. So we have to work hard to break free of that and make sure that others in the communities, surrounding communities in particular, feel that they're welcome to join in as well. We have a large newcomer population in Nova Scotia because we're a port city as well. So we've been doing a lot of intentional outreach to make sure that people who have just joined us here know that this is a community that they can join into. And where we've seen greatest success is when we, like, if you look back over the events that we've hosted, there are a number that are offered by people who are new to Nova Scotia. And the more that happens, the more you start to see people from those communities who see themselves in this work and then start to come to all of the things. We've also been intentional about hosting events in communities that are predominantly newcomers. So like maker swaps, we hold in a library that is in a region where a lot of new families are concentrated. So that becomes theirs and they get to own it, and it speaks their language, and it is a space where that it looks and feels like their community, and it works differently for them. So I would say the demographics vary and should based on the community, but the outreach to broaden that sense of community should also be intentional. Hope that helps, Helen. Yeah, how about step 8? But keep the questions coming. That's really helpful too. Now we definitely skipped ahead too. I saw that one happen. There we go. This is just a really simple point to say that we do want to make sure that we ask permission to videotape or take any pictures of people that are at the events. But my goodness, people love it. Like it is a part, we have a whole online community of people who, like I've received emails where people say, I've never made it to anything that you do, but I just love that this is happening in the community. We have like a really simple GoFundMe that we don't do any work to advertise in any way, but we've had people, you know, send $40 and just say, this is great, keep doing what you're doing. I've never been to anything, but I love following the pictures online. And I think it's because there's a sense of connection where they just, there's a maybe positive news, and it's nice to watch that happen. So we do have a large following of the online community. One thing that we have thought about and intentionally never done is the webcasting or Facebook Live of our events, because again, it's not about the skills that's being shared, it's about that sense of community that's happening between the individuals, and we wouldn't necessarily want to disrupt that with having with having the presence of cameras in there or any sort of online interaction being something that distracts from the attendees' experience. But we do try to share as much as we can the how-to manuals from classes or the recipes from sessions that have happened, or the pictures of the swaps and the pictures of the people that are engaging, what they're engaging in has been kind of a part of that online community. How about the next one? So this is something that we're working on it's really exciting to me. We didn't even have a guest book, which is terrible, and I regret it very much. But to have notes from the community and a way to reach out and connect, that's been really helpful, and we want to do more of that. So we've been working on templates that can be used to follow up with people after the event, just to solicit suggestions for other workshops, or say, hey, how did it go? Like, what was your experience with your community? We've been working to tie our kind of evaluation of what's happening back to a piece of work that's happening here in Canada called the Canadian Index of Wellbeing. And to measure against an index of well-being will help us understand if the work that we're doing in community is actually moving the dial for that community to have a greater sense of well-being. So we share questions that come off of that index in our template to make sure that we can be consistent with the data that's coming off of that survey and other indices as well. And we just would love, if anybody's making use of this model, we have kind of a end of year, hey, how did it go? Tell us more about it. We would just love to know if this is happening anywhere in the world. How is it working, and in what way is it working or not working? What would you change? What are you experiencing? How is it affecting or impacting your community? And what could you share back into the community? So we're working on that as a tool that can connect for people that are implementing. How about the next slide? So ultimately, this is about drawing together a sense of community, and we are here to help, because that's kind of the whole point of what it is that we're doing. It is simple, and it's maybe just the spark that people needed to get something very simple going that can have great impact. So we want to be as helpful as we can with the tools and the resources needed to help you go on your own journey of figuring out how to host and how to use the platform of folk schooling to draw your community together. Seems, again, almost too easy to say. Just give it a try and give us a call. And if we can help, we will. So that's the thoughts that we've been putting into helping folks get started. I would love to bounce it out for any questions or thoughts or things I may not have covered.
So this is the time where everybody can unmute. Unmute, join the conversation. And as everyone's getting the courage to speak on through Zoom, can you just, there was a question that came in when people were registering about the bartering aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And, kind of how do you manage that piece of it? Like if, do you have to, you can't come in the door because you don't have something?
Yeah, no. We do state that really clearly when people sign up for our events. The title of the events for most of our activities are barter-based learning session ... and fill in the name of the activity. So it is part of both the title of the event. It's part of the messaging around, and one of the things that maybe I should say in case people aren't aware of it, but when we book a facilitator in to do a class, we ask them what it is that they'd like to receive in exchange for their knowledge. So they get to identify handfuls of things that they would, and we kind of coach them to pick things that may be accessible, kind of offer a broad spectrum so that everybody can kind of find something. But if you walk in the door and all you have to share is your grandmother's chocolate chip cookie dough recipe, that's perfect, because we use barter to break down the exchange between the humans in this system. So somebody's sharing knowledge and somebody's gaining knowledge, we want to neutralize that exchange, so they're gifting it back, and then that has kind of made the exchange equal. But when you come in to my space, for instance, I do say, if you've brought anything to gift to our facilitator, it goes over here on this table, and any of the supplies you may have brought for the class, they go here, and come on in, grab a cup of tea, let's sit over. So it is part of kind of the introduction of coming in. But if ever people have, nothing to share, or they're like, oh, I didn't realize, we get that a lot with new people who are like, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, I'd really love to bring a plant. Can I drop it off at the house and you get it to the facilitator, or something along those lines? It's just, we don't overly complicate it. And we have a bit of funding that we've given to all of our startup hosts, so that if they need to top up, if for instance, you have a number of people who don't arrive or who don't come with an item to gift, then our facilitators have kind of a little fund that they can draw some money out of to have things on hand to give the facilitators. And that's been a really a big part of just making it really accessible as well. So yeah, that's kind of our thoughts on barter. I have lots of thoughts on barter, but I feel like that might be the high level stuff that you need right now.
Is there any questions out there? There was some questions that came in about, like, how do you know, like, where do you start? How do you know this is going to work in your community? And I think you addressed that in the very beginning when you were talking about having conversations. And I know at Tamarack here in the work I do, we really emphasize that conversation piece. And getting out into the community. And I love how you just say, test the theory. I'm thinking about doing this, and going to the friends in the community and, people and say, I'm thinking about doing this, and testing the waters out. I think that will help with that leap, right? Like, we're so used to, I want to do this program, so I'm going to leap and do it. And a lot of people don't, because they don't know if I don't want to fail. I think it's really the big thing, right?
Sure.
It's I don't want to do this and fail. So, can you talk about, have you come across where some of this has not worked and lessons learned from it?
Yeah, actually we have. We have. And I'm just trying to think of how to share that story most effectively. To answer the question though, about So I was presenting. I was asked to come and speak to a group of students who were visiting in Canada. They were from countries all over the world, but there was a large group of 5 or 6, I think, out of the 40 that came together from Mexico City. And the question that had come from that group, you know, they listened to the presentation, and just like chins on the floor, like hand up at the end was like, I don't understand what you talk about when you say that you just open up your front door. They said, living in Mexico City in particular, like I go from my home to my place of work and back again, and there's not a lot of interaction with others. I wouldn't open my door and just let anybody come in. That's not possible. Like, this is just not possible where I live. And as we were talking about it further, we were kind of teasing out this idea of, it doesn't have to be a big thing though. Like, could you find 3 or 4 people that would come if you called, to learn about, you name it? Could you pick a topic that would be of interest that 5 or 6 people or 3 or 4 people would come to? And they said yes. And I was like, but that's where you start. It's okay to just start with 3 or 4 people that would be brave enough to come, and let that be enough. So it's really hard to fail at something like this, because anything that you do is better than where you are. What they were saying was, like, this is not how we live. And I think what we came to at the end of that conversation was like, how is it ever going to be any different if you just keep doing it that same way? If you want to live differently in your community, what is the small thing that you can do tomorrow that might lead you down that path? In places where we've had it not work as well here in Nova Scotia, is in where we've had a possible mismatch, where the facilitator has come in, and we understood it was going to be a skills share, and we did the prep and had the conversation, but that facilitator has come in and made it more about selling something. It just feels very different. And we're really tuned into that in a big way now, to make sure that this is about community development, not about pitching a business or selling a commodity, and not using this platform for that. That's been something that we've experienced, that we've been very, we now feel very strongly, and we now know how to avoid, I guess. But really, like, you can't, it would be pretty tricky to fail, because everything that you do is kind of just that one step forward down this path of creating a greater sense of inclusion. Small is great. I see a question about an ideal group size, 8 to 10. Yes, we very much limit the space. For lots of reasons, but mainly because we are using small residential spaces or community centers. Even when we have larger space, we're trying to make use of existing space, because the point of this project is to say, you don't need $1 million to start up a giant maker space, when you can make use of the available resources that are in your community and rethink the possible use of space, like residential spaces. So, like, in terms of the theory of social innovation, that's kind of where we fit in. But if you're going to use someone's living room, like mine, I don't know about you, but I can't fit more than 8-ish. 10's a bit of a reach, but we're cozy at 10. So there's that reason to limit. The other reason to limit is that we've noticed pretty much anything above 12 to 15 people, they start clustering. So you get small conversations that are happening with 2 or 3 people, and it's not as inclusive. It's not about getting to know each other, or the pockets mean that some people do feel like they're kind of outsiders to that. And we've noticed that tipping point seems to be about 12 to 15 people. So 8 to 10 to 12, that's your sweet spot for it being an initiative that focuses on community development. All well and good to host classes where there are 35 people that are building something together in a community workshop or something, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're hosting space where people can get to know each other more deeply in community, and that's why we restrict the size. To the question of, like, do we advertise that there's limited space? Yes, because we say, the tickets, we use a ticketing process, so people have to sign up through like a free ticketing. We use Eventbrite, and it does say, there's 6 tickets left, 4 tickets left, 1 ticket left. Unfortunately, in our case, usually the tickets are gone within about like 3 minutes. It's the wildest thing to watch. As soon as we post it, they're gone, and I think that's become a bit of a source of frustration for our community. Is like, I didn't get that in my news feed fast enough to be able to grab it. So that might be a problem that you'll experience as well, but we can commiserate after you get to that point.
That's an amazing problem to have.
And super consistent for all of our programming. And we've had to say things like, we had a couple people that would grab all the tickets, so we've had to say things like, it would be lovely to see some new faces, and be really intentional about, like, if you've come to a class recently, maybe give an opportunity for others to attend, or, so we do that kind of messaging, but it's just being open and honest with the community. It doesn't seem to be something that needs to be overly managed. Just, it needs to be honest. Like, this is why we're doing the thing that we're doing, and why this size of a group matters, and why, if we had, like I said, 80 some odd people that tried to sign up for soap making, that's a really popular session because people want to know how to do something really practical. So we've just offered a whack of soap making classes to make sure that we can create as much access as possible. And there's a question, are you seeing an increase in civic engagement or initiatives being born in the community beyond people who come to the classes? Yeah, it's interesting. I was just interviewed by a fellow yesterday who's doing his PhD on social enterprise, and he was asking that question as well. And yes, I mean, we've had people that have come to our classes, learned to do something, and developed it into a business of their own. That's been an interesting thing to watch, is that a skill that's learned in a barter-based environment to then become something that they can monetize, something that can become a business for them. That's been really lovely to watch. But in terms of the shared gardens or communal uses of space otherwise, I think there's something about, I think I saw that Maureen was here, but I don't see her face, so maybe she can't chime in. But we have one of our hosts down in the Annapolis Valley who, the people that are coming to her space are sharing in a much different way. They're in a rural community. It's 2+ hours outside of an urban center, or more actually. And so this has started a whole communal practice, I guess, of sharing and thinking differently about how they make use of space. What I'm seeing here in the city, in the venues that we have here locally, is that people who come to the classes, that's what birthed our maker swaps, because there were so many people who were teaching things in classes that all these people had these new skills and were creating things that they wanted to be able to share with each other. So that spawned out from there. And we have lots of outreach, which is interesting, from local businesses. We had a call yesterday from folks who run a community workshop, and they said, is there anything that we can build for you to use in your like schoolhouse space? They were talking about building a pizza oven for us so that we could host gatherings of that nature, and like just such generosity. I do think that some of it's because we just have a culture of that in Nova Scotia, which is quite lovely, but I also think that the world is calling out for more of this. And if we can build a community of hosts who just demonstrate that we're normalizing this kind of behavior, it allows space for others to step into what they can then do as a contributor to this. They might not want to host folk school classes, but they might want to do all kinds of different things, and they were just waiting for someone to make it okay for them to try their weird little idea, like we tried our weird little idea a couple of years ago. Recurring sessions, one-time workshops, both. Yeah, we do. So the question was, do you do recurring sessions or are they one-time workshops? We've had a couple where the skill needs to be a recurring session. So when we've done ceramics, for instance, we've had a facilitator come in and teach like pinch pots. So the first was, we did drinking vessels. So you learned how to make glasses and mugs and things like that. But then she needed to go fire them, dry them, fire them, bring them back, teach glazing, take them, fire them, bring them back. And that was all done on a barter basis by our facilitator, which I thought was phenomenal. And then she did 3 more in a row, which was beautiful. So like ceramic would be a great example of things that are recurrent. Some of our facilitators just really like they do the first one and they're nervous and they're shy, and then they love it, and then they do a whack more. So we've done a bunch of like, we can't offer enough Indian cooking classes. We just have, you know, a great relationship with a woman who actually, she doesn't host in any of our spaces. We go to her and host in her home because that's where she's more comfortable. But yeah, she has so much talent and skill to share. And anytime that, like, if our average class fills in 3 minutes, that one fills in 1.5 minutes, definitely. Like, as soon as it's posted, it's gone. So some of them are maybe not successive per se, but we'll do repeats. And what we notice are more likely to attract the larger crowds are the things that are super practical. So things that help people become a little more self-sustaining, a little bit more resilient, a little bit more anything kind of permaculture based, or yeah, really practical skill development, that draws out the crowd for sure. But realistically, it does not seem to matter what it is that we're offering. They're kind of just coming because they want to find like-minded people who are seeking community, and the topic is just their excuse to gather. So, class registration via text. Many of our residents are not online. No, cool. Try that. Let me know how it works. That sounds really interesting. We definitely have that question. Like, our problem was, like, we went the easy route and just posted something on Facebook for our first couple of classes, and then we became, oddly enough, like a Facebook community. And I'm not a huge Facebook fan, but that seems to be how a lot of people, like around here, that's really common. But it's not consistent all over the province, and there are certainly groups that are intentionally moving off of Facebook, and they want to know about these classes as well. So texting is not something we've ever tried, but we have gone down a path of like putting a sign-up sheet, like at the library, to see who sees that one, and they become the only people that even knew that class was happening, so they can sign up for it that way. We cannot post them on our website. Everybody wants us to post the classes on the website, but they feel so fast that, like, we can't get them up fast enough for people to even notice that they're there. So maybe texting is a great idea. I like that. Who else has ideas I can try?
Yeah. I wonder, I'm actually thinking about, you know, asset-based community development, and, you know, you talk about residents and their gifts and their assets, but they also talk about associations and institutions. And so, and I think you touched upon this a little bit about the pizza oven,
Mm-hmm.
but how have, or do you, I guess, how have or do you involve associations and institutions in this? Or is it just strictly resident led? Like, I'm just thinking, you know, there could be supported materials, or because there are always organizations and institutions, you know, we go into a community, I'm saying we, in my public health days, and we want to help with this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
Yeah.
want, you know, one of my things was stress reduction. And I'm thinking, hello, you can't get any less stressed and more, you know, relaxed than being in a group of people. And so I'm thinking, if I came across this, you know, would you be open to, how would I support this?
Yeah, I think in our early days, the biggest challenge was that, like, we started with literally $4, and we used those $4 to buy mason jars so we could send sauerkraut home with people. That, like, it was so small that, and all of our classes were so well supported by volunteers or like donated materials. We didn't really need stuff or like funding, which is the easy offer. People are like, how can I? We didn't, like, we said, you know, just stick with us. We're going to stay small for a while and grow and learn as we go. But now, like, institutions, I'd mentioned our libraries, we have the most wonderful support from the Halifax Public Libraries, which is like a really big community tool in our neck of the woods. We are well invested and committed to our library spaces, and lovely to have them on board as partners. And there are institutions that we're in conversation with now that are doing very similar work and they're kind of seeking us out now to say, like, we want to align with this because this is, like, we've been researching this for a really long time, but you're actually just doing the thing. And now, like, how can we pair that up? So just very recently, like within the last month, that has become my full-time job, is to spend time in those conversations with folks to figure out how we can partner these things. But again, it's been so very simple and so very like, we've tried not to overcomplicate it intentionally. And so we don't need to think about it like a big organization that connects all of the things. We really just wanted to create a platform where that kind of simple action can be started by anybody, anywhere. And then as it grows, you'll likely get to a place where I'm in right now, which is, and now we're ready for partners. And now we're ready to kind of pair these things and share what we've learned and bring it out. But I guess for the purpose of this webinar, I would say it doesn't need to start big to be successful. It can start actually quite small and be very successful without having to scale upwards. Our intention is to scale this way and deeply.
I'm just realizing the time.
Yeah.
And I want to respect people's time, but you know, you talked about bread, and I think of this as bread. You can do Irish soda bread, which is a no-fail, always works no matter how you follow that recipe, simple. And then, you know, or if you're really confident in stuff, you can make that bread where you have to put yeast and rye and add herbs and cheese, and, you know, so there, like, it's this is like bread. You can start just the small and be very successful, and or, you know, work your way up, or start with the yeast and all the yummy stuff that goes into bread, and make it rise. So
that's a lovely analogy. Yeah.
Yes.
We're raising some serious sourdough here now. We're
sourdough
at that of like complicated bread, mainly because we want to build a community of practice in Canada, of people who are doing this all across the country and are making a Canadian contribution to the international rethink about folk schools. And so that's why I put all of this out into the commons. We're not charging for anything. We're just saying, like, if you're going to do this, come and find us and let us know that you're doing it. So A, we can help, and B, we can track it, and we can do it all together. So that, like this, I think of like the Canadian practice is like a beautiful round loaf of sourdough.
Or basket of bread, and all different kinds, right? And you come. So thank you very much, and this was very insightful, and it got down to the how-to, and then on your website it has a lot more tools, and you can go and read the guide on your own. But the underlying basis of all of this is asset-based, and I just want to talk about upcoming webinar event we have in London, Ontario, June 9th and 11th. And it's celebrating neighbors, measuring the impacts of asset-based community development. So we're bringing John McKnight to do ABCD. We have community engagement, working with Jennifer to see if I can bring this here and do a workshop on Life Schoolhouse. And so stay tuned for that. Go to the website, talk to me if you wanted to come, and we'll get you here somehow, some way. It's a great time, and lots of about 300. We're hoping for over 300 people, all doing community work. It's an inspiring, moving, motivational 2.5 days. And then we have some more webinars coming up that you might be interested in terms of asset-based community development with an urban Indigenous context, and then how do you evaluate your asset-based work. And so that's on there. We did finally get this recorded halfway through. And so we'll send the PowerPoint and the recording as much as we have. And, you know, connect with Jennifer or myself on, you know, what we can do to, you know, get this basket of bread across Canada. Thank you very much.
And down to Mexico. Right?
And down to Mexico, yes. I'm going to barter, send warmth and sun, and I'll send my resources to you. So, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.